So real quick, before we get into the video, I do want to give you a bit of a warning. The quality of the footage ahead is going to be a little bad in some places. I took it from my stream because I streamed this entire playthrough, and I didn't exactly crank the settings up super high during some of the streams. So we're either rocking with like 720-60 or even sometimes 720-30 in some areas. It doesn't look great. I was kind of just working with what I had at that point, and I didn't have a wired connection for stream, so it caused a couple of problems. Hopefully that'll be okay though.
Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry! Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one!
Okay, let's get this out of the way right off the bat. I'm choosing not to talk about the original release of Gestalt in the West. It's the same game with Papa NieR instead of Brother NieR, less content, worse gameplay, and I'd either emulate it on PC to get it running at a stable frame rate, or deal with it constantly dipping into single digits on original hardware. I have played it, I do own it, but I'm not going to review it. For all intents and purposes, V1.22 is the definitive version of NieR. Maybe if these videos do super well, I'll do an addendum video and talk about Gestalt, but I've got enough on my plate without completing the same game twice. With that out of the way, NieR is the third game in the Drakengard franchise. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'll try to move quickly. NieR is the last game ever developed by Cavia before they shut their doors. Apparently, Cavia was sold to the company AQ Interactive in 2005, where it was disbanded and absorbed into AQ in 2010, just 2 months after NieR released. I have to imagine this was in part due to NieR underperforming, as it seems it only sold 70,000 copies in its first week. That might be the Japanese sales only though, as information on Western sales is completely non-existent. The only info I can find is that the original version of NieR has lifetime sales of 500,000 worldwide. Either way, the game did not sell tremendously well. This was likely not helped by the strange multiple releases it had. NieR is actually two different games, Gestalt and Replicant. Gestalt features a middle-aged man as the protagonist with a daughter named Yona. Replicant features a teenage boy protagonist who is Yona's older brother instead. In Japan, Gestalt was exclusively on the Xbox 360 and Replicant was released on the PS3. The West never received Replicant until the remake, only receiving Gestalt. There's a reason Replicant sold quadruple the amount of Gestalt in its first week, reaching 60,000 sales. The Xbox has historically underperformed in Japan, and sticking the character that's going to be less popular in Japan on an already floundering console was a baffling decision. NieR was too ambitious for itself, and crumbled under the weight of multiple releases and being multi-platform. Of course, the reception and popularity of this game has shifted completely. As I said earlier, the original version sold 500,000 copies. What I haven't said yet is that the remake sold 1.5 million. The original NieR has now sold 2 million copies overall, and the remake outright tripled the original. The first game released a mostly lukewarm reception, but V1.22 is critically acclaimed and considered one of the best RPGs of the last decade. I think the original NieR is probably the most important game in the Drakengard franchise, and it has a lot of history. From being a flop so big that it killed the company, to a critically acclaimed game that sold millions of copies, there's a fascinating story behind this one. But I know you're not here for numbers and a history lesson, you're here to listen to some nerd on the internet talk about a game she really likes. So, here we go! NieR Replicant is the story of a teenager named... I guess NieR? And his sister Yona. The game starts in the summer of 2053, with the siblings in an abandoned building and snow falling outside. Yona is clearly sick and dying. NieR is doing his best to take care of her, but it's apparent that she's struggling to stay alive. Before they know it, NieR is attacked by dark, inky creatures named Shades. He tries to fight them off before being swatted away like a fly. In a fit of desperation, he grabs a book nearby. The book seems to be magical, as NieR's strength is multiplied, and the book begins to fire magic blasts at the Shades. After slaughtering them together, NieR and his book run back inside to Yona. She's struggling, but alive. Yona found a cookie inside, and offers it to NieR. Suddenly, she has another coughing fit, as black shadows and letters appear on her face. The scene shifts to 1,412 years later. NieR is getting ready for a day of hunting, and Yona is sitting in bed next to him. This marks the start of the actual game. We meet the characters Divala and Popola, who are like parental figures for NieR and Yona, though Popola is also the quest giver for NieR. After a few basic quests, Yona ends up running off to look for a legendary flower that supposedly cures any sickness, and NieR finds her at the top of an old shrine. She's locked behind 2 massive shades and a book. We find out that his name is Grimoire Weiss, though we just end up calling him Weiss. He's the same as the books from the intro. He makes NieR more powerful and uses magic to blast away shades. We save Yona, and Divala and Popola tell NieR a legend about Weiss. Supposedly, through finding all the sealed verses, spells that Weiss can use, he can also cure the disease Yona has. This disease is known as the Black Scroll and is ravaging the population. Vice could be the key to saving all of humanity, but more than anything, NieR wants to save Yona. And that's it. That's the setup for NieR. A young man goes on an adventure with his magical book to save his sick sister. Through the story, he meets a couple of party members who join him on his quest, and he fights plenty of monstrous shades to save the world. It sounds a little generic like Drakengard 2's plot, but there's enough questions here to keep our curiosity running. Why are NieR and Yona here when this is over 14 centuries later? Why haven't they aged? What are Vice and the Black Scroll? It's a super engaging hook, and all this happens in the first 2 or so hours of the game. So, what are you going to be doing moment to moment for the next 50 or so hours? Lots of fighting, a whole lot of mashing the attack button. The gameplay feels like an even more refined version of what was present in Drakengard 2. NieR levels up and has a wide variety of weapons he can upgrade to become stronger. In combat, you'll be doing basic combos with heavy or light attacks, though there are no special combo enders like Drakengard 2. Instead, you can opt to charge an attack to do a special powerful move. These are all the same for each weapon type, so you'll generally do a big sweep attack or a strong single target strike depending on whether you hold a light or heavy attack. You can dodge to avoid damage, block attacks, or do a parry to counterattack for huge damage. Grimoire Vice is also a combat component. As you progress through the game, you get different spells for him to use. These range from small magic blasts to slamming enemies with fists, summoning a doppelganger, using a magic shield. Vice can do a lot of different things. It keeps the gameplay varied and adds a lot of player choice to the flow of combat. You also have a couple of party members who I won't say the names of yet, but one of them is a mage and the other one is a melee fighter. They're always at your side when they join you, and they're AI controlled. You can give them orders so they'll focus on different objectives and behave how you need them to. I kinda prefer this over the way the first 2 games handled party members. Them being super moves in Drakengard 1 is fun, but Ariosh is so much better than the other 2 that there was no point to switch them out. The limited uses also gave me ultimate healing item syndrome, where I was worried I'd need them more later. Drakengard 2's playable party members were fine, but with how poorly they were balanced, I only ended up playing Noe or Mana anyways. Always playing as NieR and having your 2 party members do their own thing is perfect for my playstyle. Now, let's get into the major differences in this game. The first is that it's no longer level-based. NieR is open world, though the world is small and only has a few important locations, with areas to connect them. Of course, NieR doesn't have a dragon, and instead has Vice. All the gameplay in NieR is grounded, so no flying for you. Weapons also upgrade differently now. In NieR, they're now upgraded at a blacksmith with money and upgrade materials. This contributes to the more open feel of the game, and means you have to make trips back to the blacksmith every now and then. Luckily, they're located in a major story that you'll visit quite a few times throughout the game. Items drop aplenty, though for rarer ones you'll certainly have to do some grinding. Luckily, plenty of weapons upgrade with easily accessible items that you'll gain naturally through the story. On the subject of weapons, there are 3 kinds of them in this game. Man, each Drakengard game has had less than the last. Drakengard 1 had 8 weapon types, 2 had 5, and now NieR has 3. And for the entire first half of the game, you're locked to one-handed swords as your only weapon choice. This isn't bad, as you're getting acquainted with the systems, and luckily you'll actually be spending substantially more time in the second half. Then, you get access to spears and 2-handed swords. One-handed swords are fast and do a light amount of damage. Spears are slower, but do a moderate amount of damage. 2-handed weapons are extremely slow, but hit like a freight train when you land them. You can freely swap equipped weapons, and hot swap between your last equipped weapon in each category. So much control and customization is handed to the player, and it's really nice. This game wants you to play your way, and that feels great. NieR definitely feels like the kitty gloves came off, and Cavia really figured out what they were doing with these games. The combat is snappy, responsive, and satisfying. The progression and variety are super solid, and the player is in control. I only really struggled with how repetitive combat could be, but with the outstanding boss fights this game has, I never struggled with it too much. The enemy variety isn't the best, but they keep things fresh, and the varied encounters keep you on your toes. I know some of this is due to the remake, but the core feel is the same. The game is just faster and has some annoying features removed. In the original, you couldn't walk while charging magic. Even if it's slowed down in the remake, you can still move around, and it's a huge benefit. Often in the original, it felt pointless to use anything other than Dark Blast because you were locked in place. But in Replicant, you can still be a bit mobile while getting your big hits off. That's generally all I have to say about the gameplay for NieR. It's another solid improvement over the already good gameplay of Drakengard 2, and I never got burnt out of it. I have 81 hours and 100% achievement completion in this game. I finished it at around 60, so I spent approximately 20 just grinding for materials. This isn't a huge problem because it was decently fun to just put on a YouTube video and grind for an hour or 2 at a time, but it did start to wear on me several times. I'll talk more about this later on though. For now, let's get into the story. Our quest for the sealed verses takes us to a village called the Eyrie. Here, we find that all the villagers are terrified of outsiders and refuse to help us find the sealed verses. On our way back, we check out a little trailer on the outskirts of town and find a very angry woman named Kaine. We knock her down, but she stands back up and hits us with her own magic. The fight is rudely interrupted by a massive shade that Kaine tells us is hers to kill. We put up a good fight, but the shade is too powerful and kicks our asses. It runs off, Kaine tells us we suck, and we go back home to find Yona in a ton of pain. And here's where the game starts to drag a bit. In between finding the sealed verses, we're frequently tasked with taking care of Yona. This time we ask Popola for help finding pain medicine, and she recommends getting a shaman fish. We go to a nearby beach town called Seafront and get a fishing lesson from an old man. He gives us a pole and tells us to catch the fish ourselves, so we do. We're interrupted by an old lady who asks us to grab the mail, and we also get a letter for Popola. We head back and give the shaman fish to Yona, and when she wakes up in the morning, she feels much better. We go talk to Popola, and she tells us the area is under attack by a bunch of shades. Before we deal with that though, she recommends us to a blacksmith in the Junk Heap. This place is basically a mountain with a bunch of scrap all over the place, and there we find the blacksmith, run by two boys. We ask them to upgrade our weapons, but they don't have the supplies they need to do so. The older brother, Jacob, asks us to go into the mountain and grab the upgrade materials. We go in and bust up a bunch of robots and recover what we need. We head back, Jacob upgrades our weapons, and the younger brother, Gideon, freaks out about his mom. Apparently, she went into the mountain and hasn't come back out, so we offer to find her. After battling our way all through the Junk Heap again, we reach the furthest point that we can and find a giant machine that's gone haywire. Hi-Fi Rush this is not, and unfortunately there's no 9 Inch Nails to kick ass to. Though I would like to say, the music here is phenomenal. Anyways, we throw down with this machine and smash it up, uncovering the Dark Gluttony sealed verse along the way. Unfortunately, we also discover what happened to the boy's mother. She's found lying dead with a man who she planned to run off with. We return to the boys, and you have a small choice here. You can either tell Gideon that his mom is dead, or you couldn't find her. I opted to say we couldn't find her, and Gideon freaks out on us, running away after throwing a tantrum. Jacob asks us if she died with the person she loved, and we tell him yes. The boys bid us farewell, and we head off back to the Eyrie. We meet up with Kaine and find that massive shade from earlier terrorizing the Eyrie yet again. The shade is named Hook, and he's our next boss fight. Seriously, the game does throw 2 of them at you in like 5 minutes. This one is pretty long and drawn out, spanning multiple phases, mixed up with running and battling shades. Straight up, this boss took me half an hour on my first playthrough. If you're not prepared, it is a difficult fight. That certainly wasn't helped by playing on the hard difficulty though. When we get it to half health in its last phase, it speaks to Kaine in her grandma's voice. It basically tells Kaine to let herself die, and Kaine realizes it's a trick. So she freaks out and we pummel Hook into the ground. Literally. It gets impaled on a wooden pillar, and we realize Kaine is unconscious and dying. NieR in particular begs her to come back to life. Kaine is convinced to stay alive for the sake of protecting her friends. After she gets up, we uncover the Dark Phantasm sealed verse. Kaine then tells us about a place called Facade, where supposedly their king has the Black Scroll, and their people have been looking for a cure. There's a small chance they have one, so we go check it out. And here we really start to feel the open world in this game, and it's a little rough. We have to run from the Eyrie, back to NieR's village, all the way through a valley, and into the desert, which we then have to get through before finally reaching Facade. All along the way, there are shades, boars, scorpions, and other enemies trying to fight us. Anyways, when we try to go into NieR's village, Kaine tells us she'll stay outside and meet us at the other exit. She doesn't really expand on it, but she understandably doesn't really want to go into the village and deal with other people. Once we reach Facade, Kaine tells us she'll wait at the entrance again, and that the people in Facade have a strange language that she can't understand. Even Weiss can't understand the people in Facade, as he's never heard their language before. Luckily, we meet a young woman who wipes out on the ground. We help her out, and apparently she uses sign language instead of speaking, which Weiss can't understand. This young girl is named Fira, and she has to explain things to us. Apparently, this place has a large amount of rules, and they're mostly extremely arbitrary. After the lengthy guide around the kingdom, Weiss learns the language and allows us to communicate with everyone in town. However, we still aren't allowed passage in to meet the king, so we head back to the entrance along with Fira. Apparently, Kaine saved Fira a long time ago. We get interrupted while talking, and overhear the guards freaking out about the prince going missing. Apparently he's in the Baron Temple, and one of their rules is that nobody except for royalty can enter the place. Kaine uses the debt that they owe her for saving Fira to bend the rules and get into the temple. Fira guides us through an awful sandstorm, and we reach our destination. To fight our way through here, we have to complete a bunch of trials with rules in them. Basically, it's just solve a sliding puzzle without jumping, fight a bunch of enemies without magic, stuff like that. We find the prince, and he gets abducted by a cube. A couple rooms later, Kaine breaks the rules and gets abducted too. So we reach the end of the temple with just NieR and Weiss, and get into a boss battle with a ton of those living cubes. Very reminiscent of the gargoyle cubes from Drakengard. During the battle, Kaine joins back up with us to help kick some ass, and after a sorta long puzzle battle, we save the prince. He finds a mask, and we head back to Facade. As it turns out, the king died, and the prince went to the temple to get his mask and become the new king. As the new king, he asks us what he can do to repay our debt. NieR cleverly instates democracy, and they make Rule 0, which allows for people to vote to change or remove rules that they don't like. After all that rigmarole, we find out that the king died of Black Scroll, and Facade doesn't have a cure for it. We help save the prince, but we're no closer to saving Yona. We head back to our village to check on her, and we spend the night at home. We have a dream, and it sorta turns into a novel. We're hunting a sealed verse in the Forest of Myth. NieR shakes it off as a weird dream when he wakes up, and we go and check on Yona. Apparently, she had a dream about the Forest of Myth as well. NieR goes and talks to Popola about it, and apparently she got a strange letter from the mayor of a village in the Forest of Myth. So, off we go. The entrance is across the plains, not too far from the Eyrie. We get into the village and talk to the mayor. He says something strange about dreams and contagious words. Then, we get pulled into his dream and are caught in the death dream. Apparently, it forcibly pulls you in, and you don't even realize you've fallen asleep. So, yippee! The game turns into a full-blown novel/text adventure at this point. Plenty of fourth wall breaking, mostly from Weiss getting angry at the narrator. After some puzzles and a decently long text adventure section, we free the mayor and ourselves from the death dream and get the Dark Execution sealed verse. We can help the other villagers here too, but it's side quest content and just more of the text adventure stuff. So, we head back to our village with a new sealed verse in tow. We talk to Popola again and explain the death dream to her. After some conversation, we ask if she needs help, and apparently she's trying to repair the canal that connects all of the villages together. However, the guy who's supposed to be repairing it hasn't shown up to work in a while. Oh yeah, time for what's basically another mandatory side quest. We head to Seafront and meet the guy who's looking for his missing wife. He asks us to find her, apparently they both carry a big red bag. I'm not going to explain all this. We find the bag outside Seafront and she shows up again. The guy will work on the canal. It's a long and annoying quest. We tell Popola the canal will get fixed, and then we go home to Yona. She asks us to help out her friend who is a pen pal of hers. Apparently he lives south, in between NieR's village and Seafront. He's got a creepy Resident Evil looking mansion and a weird butler to boot. So we go on to help out and are left in the dining room. Seriously, is this not the Spencer mansion? While the butler goes to fetch the boy. We look around, and when we get back to the dining room, Kaine has disappeared. We head to the courtyard and find statues of people that look a bit too realistic. After even more searching, we run into the boy we're looking for. He's the master of the manor, a young blindfolded boy named Emil. Apparently he's blindfolded because his eyes work like Medusa and he doesn't want to turn us to stone. We look around the mansion, and apparently there are a bunch of butlers who might very well be robots. Apparently, the butler was writing the letters that were sent to Yona to get us here and help Emil fix his eyes. The cure for it is in an area filled with shades, apparently. And here, we get Emil as a companion. He uses his eyes to turn the shades to stone, instantly killing them for us. After fighting our way through the mansion, we reach the library. In this library is another living book like Weiss. And it's a new boss fight. We kick the shit out of it until it summons a shield and Kaine just appears again. She does this a lot, huh? So we beat the book up and it explodes into a bunch of pages. We find the research report on petrification and the Dark Whirlwind sealed verse. Unfortunately, the research paper is written in some kind of code, and we will have to wait for Emil's butler to decode it. We get a sweet scene as we're leaving the mansion, where Kaine tells Emil to never be ashamed of who he is, and to never give up. I haven't gone into it much so far, as there's a lot of plot and quest to summarize, but the character interactions in this game are just outstanding. Pretty much every named character in here is masterfully written, and their dialogue is fantastic. Emil will get more screen time later, but him and Kaine are so incredible when they're on screen together. Every scene with them is so good, and I'm excited to get into the serious character moments we get later on. Anyways, we have all of the sealed verses now. After leaving the mansion, we talk to Weiss, and all we have to do now is find the Grimoire NieR, Weiss's brother book. So we head back home to check in on Yona, and we tell her that we're almost done with our quest. After an emotional scene together, we head over to Popola for more medicine. As it turns out, she ran out before we got there, and she sends us to look for something called vapor moss. I think about this time I started losing some steam on this game. All these fetch quests and weird diversions from the plot were so obnoxious. I think the game was intentionally paced like this, though. As we head to the south end of the village again to pick some vapor moss, we hear Emil enter the gate. He falls to the ground, and we take him back to Popola. Apparently, he just exhausted himself running to the village and passed out. When he wakes up, he tells us that there's a ton of shades coming to the village, and we need to evacuate. And right on cue...
Damn it! It's not gonna hold!
We run to the gate and meet Divala along the way, who we ask to make sure Yona is safe and to help evacuate the villagers. We clear out the shades, but the largest enemy yet appears and breaks the gate down. So, now we've got to fight back this giant enemy. No matter the damage done to it, the shade regenerates all of what gets thrown at it. Even worse, it makes a beeline for the library. We keep beating it up, and eventually Kaine joins us again. We have to keep the huge shade from the library, because that's where Yona is hiding out. We make a last stand, and finally kill it right before it reaches the library. We head in because there are shades, and Emil joins us for the fight. We bust some shit up, and the head of the giant shade from outside breaks in. It pulps Emil, and we make the decision to try and trap it in the basement since it refuses to die. It seems successful, until NieR takes a spear through the shoulder. We see a menacing shade who looks just like him, and the shade now has Yona in tow. He also has Grimoire Noir behind him, and the Grimoire tases the shit out of us. In a conversation between Noir and Weiss, we learn that NieR's lookalike is called the Shadow Lord, and that the two books are supposed to fuse to free the shades. I'm just gonna play what happens next.
Weiss! You dumbass!
Kaine.
Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry! Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace! How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord! Come over here and give Weiss a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord! Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
I am one with the shadow. Huh? Bitch.
We grimoires exist to create in this world a new and just paradise. We must unite. The world demands it.
Paradise.
Yes, and we are so close to realizing it.
Please don't go, Weiss.
Who's there?
It's okay. I'll understand. I'll understand if you forget us. But I promise I won't forget you. I'll remember you, no matter what. I'll keep the memory of Grimoire Weiss alive forever. And that's not all I'll do. You hear me? I'll chase you till the end of time, and I'll bring you back to us. So Weiss, please. Please come back.
Damn it, we need to stop him! If we don't do something, that black book will absorb Weiss!
Black. White. Black. White.
Yes, now we shall unite in common purpose. Then the world can finally bear witness to our true power.
Weiss!
Weiss!
We've got to...
For the last time, my name is Grimoire Weiss, and it is not to be abbreviated.
Weiss!
Weiss!
Good to see you, Kaine. Although I don't think anyone has ever accused me of being a little bitch before. And you, we meet again.
Weiss, you okay?
I believe I could ask you the same question right now.
Impossible. We must unite. We must become as one.
I don't like you, and I want nothing to do with you. Besides, I have my companions.
You're back!
Of course they're weak, and they whine when I leave.
Vice!
It's almost too much trouble, but they are my friends. I shall fight by their side, now and forever.
Vice, thanks.
NieR steals the sealed verses from Vice, so now we gotta kick some ass and steal them back. After a solid fight, NieR gets impaled again, and the Shadow Lord takes Yona away. On top of that, Kaine asks Emil to freeze her in front of the door containing the unkillable shade. And thus, the first half comes to an end. Yona is gone, Kaine is basically dead, and NieR is severely injured. But just as quickly as it's over, we start the second half with a NieR all grown up. We've got access to spears and two-handed swords, and NieR is now a certified badass. It's been 5 years since the first half ended, and NieR has spent that whole time searching for clues on the whereabouts of Yona and the Shadow Lord. We meet up with Popola, where NieR comments about her not looking a day older than when they first met. After a bit of chit-chat, we find that Emil has sent a letter about a potential petrification cure. So we head on over to Emil's manor, where he actually hasn't aged a day in 5 years. He explains to us that the manor has a place called the Planning Room, where Emil should be able to harness all forms of magic and cure himself and Kaine. Emil gets a headache as we make our way down to the planning room, so now we've got a bit of an escort quest. This place is infested with shades, but we can't get too far from Emil. Luckily, he's just as powerful with his petrification skills as ever, so the place isn't too tough to fight our way through. Okay, I'll quickly summarize what we find out here. Basically, this place is a magical research facility to make magical weapons. Emil and his sister Halua were held here and experimented on, with Halua's experiments successfully turning her into a magical weapon named Number 6. Emil also had experiments successfully done on him to petrify Halua. Emil is thus designated Number 7. We reach the end of the facility and find Number 6. She breaks free and eats Emil, so now we've got to kick her ass and free our man. We can't hit her with physical attacks as they'll damage Emil, so we've got to play pretty passively. Lots of dodging and spamming Dark Blasts here. After the battle, Emil and Halua fuse together into a new form. Emil, completely understandably, breaks down because of how he looks. He does finally get to see NieR's face, however, and after a little pep talk, we head back to save Kaine. Emil makes quick work on petrifying her, however soon after the regenerating shade breaks free. Though with NieR's years of experience and new arsenal, the beast can do nothing to fight back. We wake Kaine up, and even despite the transformation, she recognizes Emil right away. She also comments on how much older NieR is now, and finds out it's been 5 years. And then just as quickly, Emil and Kaine have to face bigotry, and are kicked out of the village by Divala and Popola. NieR also realizes how fucked up it is that Kaine and Emil have been sleeping outside. We go talk to Popola again after a quick apology to Divala, and she tells us that the lost shrine we found Vice in is connected to the Shadow Lord's hideout. NieR points out the obvious problem that the bridge is destroyed, but Popola informs us that the canal is finally repaired, and we can just take a boat back. So we head over, and Red Bad Guy from earlier is now the ferryman. I guess that's a promotion from repairman to ferryman? We head back to the lost shrine, battle our way through, and reach the top where we originally met Vice. Here, we find that the red-eyed statue from earlier is still alive, and it wants to kick our ass. After a long battle and an unfortunate accident, Kaine gets super-duper impaled, so we pay the kindness back to the beast. We check on Kaine, but her shade breaks free and tries to murder the hell out of us. After a fight with it, we beat the shade and get Kaine back to her human form. We have a nice emotional moment before getting back on with our adventure. We see an elevator behind a seal, and on the ground is a mysterious hunk of stone. We take it back to Popola, who can decipher the language written on the fragment. Apparently, it's one part of a key to the Shadow Lord's castle. There are 5 parts, and Popola cleverly determines that the Law of Robotics fragment is probably at the Junk Heap, and the Memory Tree is probably at the Forest of Myth, though the Sacrifice and Loyal Cerberus key fragments are unknown. Also sprinkled in here is some very important character building for NieR.
We want to fill in the words? We just run around the world killing every big monster we find, right?
Oh, splendid. By all means, let us undertake a murderous rampage.
You're just shades. Besides, it's the only way to reach the Shadow Lord.
You get a choice for where you want to go first, but I opted for the Junk Heap. Reading another novel at the Forest of Myth didn't sound super appealing at this point. So we head on over to the Junk Heap, and are met by a cutscene when we get through the doors. We see Gideon and Jacob in the Junk Heap, looking around for parts to use. Gideon sees a shiny part and trips over a pipe, which causes a bunch of metal to fall and crush Jacob. Gideon sees a machine standing behind Jacob's corpse, and the cutscene ends. When we get into the shop, we see Gideon, who now has a prosthetic arm and is all grown up. Weiss asks about Jacob, and we find out he's been dead for 4 years. After a little bit of prodding, Gideon says he hasn't heard about any powerful shades, and gets a little too excited at the prospect of destroying machines.
All I want is to destroy robots. Just rip them up.
We try to leave, but he stops us and hands the Iron Will to us. A recurring weapon in the series, the blade was formerly known as the Broken Iron in Drakengard 2, and Hymir's Finger in Drakengard 1. Here, Gideon wants us to find some memory alloy in the junk heap to fix the weapon up, and make it the not-so-broken iron. Of course, we agree. I mean, it's the token gut sword in the Dark Fantasy game. After a lengthy fetch quest, we bring the alloy back to Gideon, who tells us he'll need a little while to get the weapon repaired. He says he'll send a letter when it's done, so we'll have to come back later. We can either choose to go to the Forest of Myths or speak with Popola, where I definitely was still avoiding the potential text adventure, so Popola it is. We head back on over to the village, and it turns out Popola hasn't heard anything about the key fragments or Shadowlord's castle yet. However, Red Bag Guy has been skipping out on his shift at the ferry, so we head on over to Seafront to find him. We go to his house and find his wife, who informs us that they had a fight and he went missing. Apparently he's been gone for a week by this point, and now we need to find him. After searching around, we find out that the postman in Seafront is missing as well. We're informed that there's a huge shipwreck that washes up on the beach, so with no other leads we head over to it. Kaine and Emil are waiting for us because Kaine sent something from the shipwreck, so we head on in. Kaine is feeling under the weather, so her and Emil search the outside of the wreckage. It's just NieR and Weiss searching around a creepy abandoned boat. After a bunch of exploring and finding weird records, and potentially a ghost, we crash through the floor of the ship. There are a bunch of corpses, including the ferryman and other people from the village. We meet up with Emil and Kaine again, where Kaine informs us the presence she feels is above us. In the room, we find a scared little girl. Kaine says she's the presence, and suddenly the postman appears behind us. He asks for help from Kaine because the girl is on her period, and Kaine gets upset with him for it. He walks over to the girl, where she hulks out and reveals that she's a shade. She starts majorly breaking the ship up, and we've now got a boss fight on our hands. After fighting our way to the deck of the ship, we're attacked by a massive shade, with the little girl chilling in its mouth. Eventually, NieR ends up punching the thing's head off, but it doesn't die. It completely destroys the ship, and keeps on fighting. After a barrage of attacks, Kaine finds the postman and holds him hostage. Emil, Kaine, and NieR launch their strongest attacks while the shade is distracted, but it reforms itself in seconds. It attacks the squad and knocks them down, but the postman stops the shade from killing us. He attacks it with a stick, which stops it long enough for us to get a shot on the shade's weak point, which was formerly the little girl. She says something we can't understand while looking out at the ocean, and disintegrates. We head back to the town, and the postman explains the situation to us. He was taking care of the little girl, who he didn't know was a shade. He's overwhelmed by guilt for inadvertently helping the shade kill dozens of townfolk. On our way out of the post office, we're stopped by Red Bag Guy's wife, and we have the choice to tell her the truth or lie to her. I told her honestly, he was murdered by a shade. She breaks down, and we leave the post office. We head on back to Popola to inform her of the situation. We talk to her about the keys again, and she tells us she still hasn't figured anything out. She also tells us that we have some mail at our house, and that someone else will do the ferryman's job now, so we get to fast travel again. After heading back to our house to check the mail, we're surprised to see it isn't Gideon calling us over, but instead the King of Facade. He's getting married and wants us to come for the celebration. Of course, we head on over as quick as we can and find out who the bride is. Surprise, surprise, it's Fira! We all spend the night at the king's mansion, and after a bath we see Kaine. She doubts her place at the wedding, but we assure her that nobody will mind. We also chat with Emil, who's way too excited to get to sleep. He says he's a little jealous and wishes that he was Fira. NieR says that he's sure Emil will find a great bride one day, where he seems very hesitant about the idea. Look, I'm gonna be real here. After playing through Drakengard 2 and writing that video script, I was so happy to see this. It's not exactly subtle, but it's much better than, "Aha, Yerrick, give me that dick. Oh no, I'm so fabulous and dying, but fabulous while dying. Ooh." Just a little conversation where Emil says he'd like to be a bride is so sweet, and I think it's kind of funny that NieR and Weiss totally don't get that that's what he's implying. It feels accurate to the experience of being closeted, where there are lots of clues that you're different, but nobody really picks up on it. Or, like Weiss here, people notice but sort of steer you back to heteronormativity. Of course, I don't think Weiss is like a bigot or anything. I think he's just so far up his own ass he doesn't notice or care. After that little chat, we head outside to speak with the king. He explains that their harvest this year was poor, and they're on the brink of starvation. They're also struggling with the wolves outside the gates. NieR and Weiss tell him that it's okay to celebrate the wedding right now, because his people need to blow off some steam and have a good time. And the next morning, the wedding begins. We already know where this is heading, don't we? An injured guard appears, and the wolves crash the wedding. They maul Fiera, and we have to take them out. There's a huge shade wolf that's the leader of the pack, and it is tough. After a battle, they run off. Unfortunately, it's too late for Fiera, and she passes away in the king's arms. The king breaks down, and orders his men to go hunt down the wolves. Fortunately, one of his soldiers talks him down, if only briefly. Here, we're given a choice to go to the Forest of Myth, check the letter from Gideon, or march onto the wolves. I chose to check the letter because I wanted a powerful weapon to take on the wolf pack. We head back to check our mailbox, and then go on over to the junk heap to meet up with Gideon. He gives us the upgraded Iron Will, and then asks us to avenge Jacob. Apparently, Gideon is only kept living to kill a shade and a robot that supposedly killed Jacob. Of course we agree, as this sounds like our ticket to the next key fragment. After another lengthy battle through the junk heap, we reach the lowest point where we find the duo we're looking for. It is indeed a robot with a shade commanding it. The robot seems almost sentient, saying that its mission is to defend the shade. Kaine seems especially caught off guard by this. After doing enough damage, the robot P-33 magnetizes wings to its back and starts flying around. We shoot it out of the sky, and the shade starts attacking us. After killing it, we finish off P-33. Gideon appears and starts beating the dead robot. He also seems to completely snap now that it's dead. We go outside, and Vice lectures us about how revenge and hatred won't do any good. We then get another choice, to meet the king or go to the Forest of Myth. Do I even have to say what I did? We head back to the king's mansion and facade, and prepare for a showdown with the wolves. The king's men show up, and we all head out to kick some ass. The battle is long and tough, with dozens of wolves trying to tear us apart. Not much else to say, to be honest. We cut them all down until the pack leader is the only one left. We beat it down, but the king strikes the final blow, stabbing his spear through the wolf's head. We also acquire the Cerberus key fragment. After more grieving, we are finally forced to go to the one place I didn't want to. No more running away. It's time to read. We reach the village in the Forest of Myths and talk to the mayor, who tells us that something weird has been going on with the divine tree in the heart of the village. So we head on over and hear a strange voice talking to us. And thus begins the text adventure. We have to read 3 short stories and remember little details about them. Simple enough. At the end of it, we talk to a shade who clearly communicates with us. We answer its questions and get the memory tree key fragment. Vice mentions that he didn't know shades were capable of rational thought, and NieR says that he doesn't care if they can think. He just wants to kill them without worrying about it. Perfectly normal behavior. Anyways, after all that, we decide to head on back to Popola to see if she's learned anything about the Shadow Lord. We meet back up with her and ask the question, where she tells us she finally learned something. She was sent a letter by the chief of the area. Apparently, the area is opened up, and they have one of the fragments for us. Except it is obviously a trap we're walking into, and NieR is ignoring all of the signs because he needs to rescue Yona. We reach the area and talk to the village chief, who says he doesn't know anything about a letter. Of course. There's a little trading hub set up on the bridge around where we fought Hook in the first half. We talk to a guard, and he kinda freaks out and turns into a shade. So, now we're surrounded by dozens of shades, as the villagers either transform or are slaughtered. Kaine kills a shade that's pretending to be a kid's older sister, except, oh wait, Kaine didn't finish the job and gets stabbed. Thanks for dying during a crucial moment, again. Anyways, a giant shadow orb starts forming, so we tell Emil to protect Kaine while we go check that out. After killing more shades, the orb forms into a giant bulb with petals surrounding it. The petals serve as armor, and we have to attack the eye of the bulb to deal damage. We hurt it pretty bad, and NieR rips the petals open so Emil can get a powerful blast on it. It starts firing a huge laser back at us, so Emil distracts the shade while we hit the weak spot on the back of it. After doing even more damage, Emil and NieR fire their strongest magic at the creature. However, it refuses to die. Emil then goes kinda sicko mode and nukes the area with magic. It leads to a pretty somber scene, where Emil grieves over the countless innocent lives he just ended. It's a pretty reasonable thing to be upset about, I think. Emil lost control over himself and murdered God knows how many people. But NieR stands up, pats him on the back, and basically says, at least we're still alive. If he didn't go sicko mode, we'd be dead. Well, we finally got the last key piece, so it's about time for the final confrontation. We head on back to the village to talk to Popola. Her and Divala are in her office, and they seem pretty hesitant about letting NieR go to the Shadow Lord's castle. They back off, and we head out. Here's our spoiler break for this video. If you have any interest in playing NieR Replicant, then stop watching right now. Everything from this point forward is going to be covering the various endings and New Game Plus exclusive content. We good? I think we're good. Back to the video. After taking a boat back to the Lost Shrine, we start fighting our way through. There are a few more enemies and some mini-bosses along the way, but it's nothing we can't handle. So we reach the top again, and open up the seal blocking our path. We head on down into the Shadow Lord's castle. We reach a little garden, and have to speak to 2 birds. They give us a few questions. I don't really know that you'd get these without paying heavy attention to the lore or without knowing them beforehand. Why did humans disappear from this world? Because of a black disease. How can humans extend their lives? By separating body from soul. What is the destination of souls? They are placed in their corresponding shells, and then we can enter. We are promptly greeted by Popola and Divola. They ask us to head back and tell us it's dangerous. We tell them no, and they start fighting us. It's a tough boss fight. They have a lot of health, use a ton of magic, and do a good amount of damage. A little ways into the fight, they take the sealed verses from Weiss. Apparently the magic is theirs, which they granted to the grimoires. After more combat, they allow us entry and fly off into the distance. Weiss was damaged by the twins, so he's starting to glitch out. We press on, reaching a dance hall filled with shades. We fight even more, but the enemies don't stop coming. Kaine kicks the door ahead down, but there are dozens of little shade orbs that attack her. We help Kaine up, and the shades fuse with a mage to create a giant boar. Yep, it's another boss fight. The boar is big, beefy, and powerful. We kill it, but another one appears. This one is heavily armored, though. We beat it down, but eventually it summons poison fog to try and kill us. We break out, running up a huge spiral staircase while the boar chases us. After the stairs, we get locked in another room where we have to fight the beast. We fight it again, but it still refuses to die. Just as it's about to run us down, the King of Facade and his men appear to help us out. We fight alongside them, until the king forces us to go on without him. NieR tries to protest, but we're quickly locked out. The king and his men prepare for a final stand, and Kaine bitch slaps NieR to get him to move on. It's clear the king won't let us help him, so we've got to go on ahead. After a short walk, we meet up with Popola and Divola again. They give us a pretty big lore dump, along with some documents to read. So, let's get our reading glasses on and compile all this information. Remember back in the prologue when we saw NieR and Yona in ruined Tokyo? Well, around that time, some odd 1300 years before the main game, there was a project to save humanity from impending doom. Remember in ending E of Drakengard 1, when Kaim and Angelus fought the Queen Beast in modern-day Tokyo? Well, they didn't just kill the beast and save the day. The particles from the Queen Beast spread through the air and began infecting people with something called white chlorination syndrome. Basically, anyone affected by the airborne particles would have their bodies slowly turn to a salt-like substance, heavily resembling the Queen Beast. As their bodies turned, they would be forced to make a pact with God. If they refuse the pact, they die and turn to salt. If they agree, they turn into a species known as Legion. To cut a long story short, between the Legion and white chlorination syndrome, humanity needed an out. So they devised a plan. Project Gestalt was made to separate human beings into two forms, body and soul. After enough time had passed and humanity was ready to survive, they would reunite the body and soul into full humans again. However, the bodies, known as replicants, gained consciousness and rejected their gestalts, gestalts being the souls, and gestalts also being shades. So, the Shadow Lord is trying to save Yona and reunite with NieR, his replicant. By God, I hope this explanation made sense. I'm trying to save some time here by not explaining everything, but there is actually 1300 years worth of history and important events from ending E of Drakengard to the start of NieR. So, back to modern day, we've got to fight Divola and Popola. We hurt Divola pretty bad, and ultimately kill her. In her dying breath, she explains that they were both born without souls, and needed each other to survive. NieR tries to get Popola to stop fighting, but she snaps and tries her best to kill us. She bursts with energy and destroys the bridge to where we need to go. Emil puts us in a bubble and tries to fly us over, but Popola latches on and stops the team. Emil tells us that he can finally save something instead of destroying it, so he sends us ahead and goes back to Popola. They basically fuse into a big ball of magic and implode, leaving nothing but a crater and Emil's staff behind. We get out, where Kaine beats the shit out of NieR. Instead of fighting each other, the two of them move ahead in spite of the grief. We have to fight even more shades along the way. Seriously, Shadow Lord's castle is an insane endurance test. So, we finally reach the Shadow Lord's chamber, where he's keeping Yona. We have to fight our way through Grimoire Noir first, but he's not that much more difficult than when we fought him at the halfway point in the game. The real meat here is the Shadow Lord fight, the final boss. He's got a good amount of health and hits us pretty hard. It's a solid 1v1 melee fight. When he drops to 1/3 HP, Yona stands up and walks over to Shadow Lord, past NieR. She reveals that Replicant Yona and her Gestalt have reunited, and we are talking to the Gestalt. She tells Shadow Lord that she can hear NieR's Yona saying that she misses him. Yona steps over to a window and lets the sun burn her away, leaving Replicant Yona behind. Shadow Lord is overwhelmed by grief and continues to fight. This time he flies around and fires projectiles at us. After even more combat, Weiss seems to finally break down. He hits the ground and tells us that he's basically out of juice. He then makes the decision to sacrifice himself to lock down the Shadow Lord. With Vice Sacrifice, we strike down NieR's Gestalt, putting the Shadow Lord down. We run over to Yona, and have to call her back to us. She asks us her favorite things, and then asks who she loves more than anyone else. We say our name, and it wakes her up. NieR and Yona reminisce, before Kaine leaves them be to take care of personal shit. We see a nice memory of NieR and Yona together, then we get to see Shadow Lord and Gestalt Yona reunited in the afterlife. And that's it for Ending A. If you ignore all of our friends dying and the other ramifications of killing Shadow Lord and Yona's Gestalt, it's a happy ending. But we all know that these games don't stop at Ending A, and Replicant gives plenty more to do after you beat it once. So let's load our save and see what we've got to do. At this point, I'd actually like to give a big trigger warning for sexual assault and violent discrimination here. I know I haven't done it before with all the serious stuff in the previous games, but I think it's very warranted here. I managed to skirt around a lot of implied awful shit in the first game, though more straightforward stuff like Furiai's incestual feelings were very necessary to talk about. Here, I can't avoid it at all, because Kaine's story and character are reliant on her mistreatment, which will be explained soon. So please click off of this video if those will be a problem for you. For everyone else, buckle up. We're met with a cutscene of Emile unpetrifying Kaine, all the way back at the beginning of the second half. Things go as normal until the screen fades and we're met with the words Kaine's dream, discrimination. It's another text segment, but I'll be going into more detail on it. This one describes Kaine's childhood and how she was relentlessly bullied when she was younger. Her face is described as sexless, and the other kids her age call her a freak and throw rocks at her. Apparently, their parents encouraged the bullying due to superstition and fear surrounding Kaine. It becomes apparent pretty quickly what's happening. The main bully Demo sexually assaults Kaine, asking her to show him her penis. When she refuses, they throw her to the ground and beat her. He says some pretty nasty shit to her, and misgenders her. Luckily, before it can get any worse, an old woman shows up and smashes Demo's head with a rock. She scares him and the other kids off before pulling out a cloth and cleaning the blood off of Kaine. This is Kaine's grandmother, the only person Kaine has left after her parents died. She didn't know her grandma before her parents passed away, but her grandma took her in pretty quickly as her own. Kaine questions herself, and clearly struggles with her image and her identity. Her grandma shoots down any concerns, though, and assures Kaine that her love is unconditional. She puts a wreath of lunar tears in Kaine's hair and calls her pretty. Grandma encourages Kaine, saying that they'll be fine as long as they have each other. She helps Kaine up, and they start the walk home. Kaine is happy. Immediately after, we start the next sequence, Kaine's dreams, daily life. Grandma is chopping wood outside their home, but the axe is a, I quote, stupid piece of shit. The wood is splintering everywhere, and she can't get a good chop. Kaine offers to help, so Grandma tells her to chop wood while she fetches water. The shades have been dangerous, and she doesn't want Kaine getting hurt. Kaine realizes that the real reason Grandma wants to grab water is so Kaine won't get harassed by the villagers. They set up camp outside of the area specifically to avoid the townspeople. After trying to chop wood for the first time, Kaine cusses to vent her frustrations, and she realizes how awesome it is to cuss. After chopping for a little bit, Grandma gets home with the water. She falls to the ground in a coughing fit, though, and it becomes clear to Kaine how poorly Grandma is doing. The morning after, Kaine tells Grandma she'll go to the village to get her medicine. Against her protests, Grandma lets Kaine go. Our girl makes her way into the village, terrified of meeting Demo again, but braving it regardless. She asks a bigoted villager where the apothecary is, and despite the woman's hatred and fear, she tells Kaine. So she heads into the building, where she sees Demo. Though he's alone, with nobody to back him up. Demo and Kaine get into a screaming match, but the apothecary shuts it down. Demo leaves, and Kaine waits for the apothecary to fill Grandma's medicine. While waiting, she sees a portrait on the wall, and is enamored by it. The apothecary asks if she likes it, then explains it's a portrait he sketched of his daughter. She passed away a long time ago. He explains that portraits let you remember the people you've lost. So, he hands Kaine some crayons for her to draw with. Kaine is scared, but the apothecary explains that he doesn't care about the rumors, and he thinks it sucks that Kaine's grandma, Kali, was driven out of town. He says him and Kali used to be friends, and that he's sure she'd love it if Kaine drew a portrait of her. After getting the medicine and the crayons, Kaine leaves to go home. When Kaine gets home, she discovers her grandma asleep. She places the medicine by Kali's pillow, but Kali wakes up and inspects Kaine, making sure she's not hurt. She asks how it went, and Kaine says she had a bit of fun. She also offers to do more errands for Kali. Kaine offers to sketch her portrait, but Grandma seems to be against the idea. After more badgering, Kali relents and lets Kaine draw her portrait. Kaine hates the drawing, but Grandma loves it. Hush, I won't hear any more bull about how ugly you think it is. It came from the heart, and I'll treasure it always. She puts it up over the dinner table, but after a week, Kaine asks her to take it down. Kali refuses, and explains that the portrait makes her extremely happy. And again, this memory ends with Kaine cherishing it, remembering the joy of that moment. Immediately after, we begin another dream. Kaine's dream's separation. It begins with Kaine trying to eat a berry Kali gave her, but Kaine thinks it's a bug because it looks and smells terrible. After eating the berry and the two having a laugh together, we get an explanation that this memory is happening 5 years after Kali saved Kaine from the bullies. Kali has gotten pretty old, and Kaine has taken up most of the responsibility around the house. She plans on heading out to get stones so they can put up a wall for safety. Kali wants her to stay, but Kaine tells her they'd starve if she doesn't go out. It seems Kali's mind is going along with her body. She gets up and hangs the wreath of lunar tears on Kaine's head, telling her that she's beautiful. The two goof off some more before Kali tells her granddaughter to head out. Kaine spends the day worried about Grandma, so she doesn't get many fruits or stones. As she heads home, she sees a cloud of smoke and her house on fire. Kaine runs ahead and sees that there's an enormous shade as well as the fire. Through the description of the shade, we realize it's Hook from the beginning of the game. Kali is still alive in the burning building, and Kaine runs to go save her. Hook roars and knocks her back, before pinning Kali to the ground with a claw. The shade laughs while watching the two struggle to survive. Despite a broken ankle, Kaine gets up and goes to stab Hook with a knife. Hook launches her into the burning house, where her and Grandma get to speak for one last time. Kali begs Kaine to leave, before being crushed underfoot by Hook. Kaine's grief and fury force her to stand, apparently intimidating the shade that just ended her grandmother's life. Kaine stabs Hook again, before being flung to the ground. She snaps at this point. She felt her desire to kill, and her desire to live blend into one. And we're done reading. Time to kick some shade ass as NieR again. After we pop the giant shade's head like a grape again, we're thrust back into Kaine's dreams. This one is titled Encounter. Kaine is dying on the ground as Hook leaves the disastrous scene. She's missing at least an arm and an eye, and she hears the voice of Demo in her head telling her to die. In her dying dreams, she sees the apothecary, who wants to sketch her. Kaine denies the request, and he instead sketches Kali. However, the picture is torn apart by insects. Kaine bats the insects off, but when she looks back at it, the sketch is of Kali's corpse. The apothecary taunts her, and she accepts her fate being death. However, someone new begins to speak to her. The voice asks her to make a wish, where she retorts and says they'd never come true for her. The voice laughs at her, as darkness covers her body. She tries her best to fight back, and the voice asks for control of her body. It wants to use her to kill people. Kaine vomits because of it. The voice is a shade, and the dark slime belongs to him. He starts healing her body, but Kaine refuses to give over control. She can't die because her grandma didn't want her to. She still has to kill Hook before she goes. The shade takes hold of Kaine's left arm. She still refuses to give in, and he begs her to die. Kaine tries to cut off a chunk of her side infected by the shade, but her left arm crushes her right wrist. The shade has already taken control of her body and possessed her. He explains that he's extremely powerful, and he'll help Kaine kill anyone she wants, even Hook. Kaine is confused by this, to which the shade responds with a hilarious line. What, you think I'm some kind of racist? Some killin' snob? I don't give a good goddamn who you murder, honey pants. I just want to drink from that well. He offers to do the killing for her, before she tells him to fuck off. He has a good laugh, and says his name is Tyrion. He'll be hiding out in Kaine's heart so it can get rotten and sour. Kaine says she'll kill Hook, and then Tyrion, and he laughs it off as usual. He then warns her that if she goes soft, he'll fully take over. He hides away in her, and she gets used to her new body, before going back over to the rubble. She fishes out the lunar tears, which were in shockingly good condition. She breaks down crying, before being awoken by Emil calling for her. So, we're done with the Kaine exposition dump, but now we've got to deal with bigotry again, as Emil and Kaine are kicked out of NieR's village. In a new scene, we see him stepping out of the gates to find the two of them. We see our party members catching up and goofing off. Kaine tells Emil about her grandma, and the two of them have a laugh while thinking of ways to cure Kaine's possession and Emil's body. At this point, we also get access to the diary of NieR's mother. It's not a part of the main game. Originally it was a small DLC expansion, but it's bundled in with the Replicant remaster for free. It has some lore tidbits about Legion and White Chlorination Syndrome, but nothing super important to this video. Maybe if I do a lore video later on, then we'll have to talk about it a little more, because it is important to the overall world, but for right now, we'll be glossing over it. From this point on, we're back to standard game progression, but there will be new lore tidbits. Kaine can speak the Gestalt's language, so we'll get to understand their speech. Starting right away with us visiting the Lost Shrine again, we get to see the two armored shades who are guarding Weiss at the start. The one that's still alive is named Gretel, and it is talking to other shades while mourning its sibling Hansel's death. It doesn't want to be alive anymore from the grief, and failing to stop NieR from taking Weiss. Gretel says it used to judge the other shades for going Gestalt early, but can now talk to them as equals. However, they're interrupted by NieR and a squad showing up. All Gretel wants is to protect the shades, so they beg us not to kill them. We also now get to hear Tieren's input, and he thinks the situation is hilarious. When Kaine gets impaled, Tieren gets pissed that she's out of commission. We kill Gretel, fight Kaine again, save her, and then head back to Popola. We fill her in on the key situation and head back to the junk heap. Here, we see a young Shade and his mother being hunted down. The mother tells her son to run, and she'll stay behind to protect him. Soon after, the robot P-33 enters the room. We find out that the Shade's name is Khalil. P-33 goes to kill Khalil, but notices him crying and asks why. The boy tells him that his mom just died, to which P-33 tells Khalil about his creator dying. Khalil is afraid of being killed by humans, and P-33 vows to defend him. The Shade names P-33 Beepy, and the two stick together. We see the cutscene where Jacob dies again, but this time around we get to see Khalil and Beepy's perspectives on it. Khalil feels bad that Jacob is killed, and says that the two boys seem really nice. We are brought back to present day where Gideon hands us the Iron Will again, Weiss and NieR break the fourth wall because they already have it, and we fetch quests for the Memory Alloy again. After we get out, there's another scene with Khalil and Beepy. It's a short conversation where we learn that Khalil is teaching Beepy about the outside world and expanding his vocabulary. Apparently, the two of them want to explore outside of the junk heap. After leaving the junk heap, this time around I went to the Forest of Myth to get that out of the way, and nothing is really different. After running through the junk heap and slaughtering the machine population, we reach the boss fight with Beepy and Khalil again. Khalil commands Beepy to fight, but quickly realizes it's a losing battle and asks him to back off so they won't die. Beepy has to defend Khalil, however, so he keeps fighting. Kaine convinces herself that Khalil is just a Shade, and Tieren eggs her on, wanting her to kill the duo. At the second phase, we see that Beepy is trying to escape so him and Khalil can see the outside world. When we damage him down to 0, Khalil begs us not to kill Beepy, but of course NieR can't understand him and strikes the two down. This time we get to see Khalil die, and Beepy mourns him before passing on. As we leave the junk heap this time, the party stops and has a chat. Weiss realizes that Khalil was ordering Beepy, and Emil asks if he had a reason. Kaine interjects before stopping herself, and NieR says that it doesn't matter because all Shades deserve to be exterminated. Then they have a chat about Kaine going full Shade, and Emil says he'll stop her if it comes to that. Next we head to the Eyrie because we get the letter from the village chief, and we get some new dialogue here too. Basically, Shades have been living alongside humans in the Eyrie, and things are going smoothly, but they're afraid of NieR because he's going to come to the village and slaughter them. We get there, piss them off, and start attacking, and this time around we get to understand what this is. NieR walked into a village full of innocent people and started ripping them apart, then runs around screaming that they deserve to die. Understandably, the Shades are pissed off, and say that our party are evil people who should die instead. Kaine gets buddy, Tieren wants to take over as usual when that happens, we ask Emil to protect her, and we start the boss fight again. Things go as normal, barring a small interjection from Tieren when Emil goes sicko mode. That is, until he finishes going sicko mode, and we get another reading sequence. This one is from Emil's perspective, and he explains that his magical explosion is from his and Halua's instincts as magical weapons. We then start Emil's dream, Rampage. I won't go into a ton of detail here, it's a more detailed recap of the incident where Halua went on a rampage and Emil had to subdue her. It does build on Emil's character a lot though. After being beaten and mistreated by one of the scientists, Emil goes to petrify Halua to save her from being a monster. Jumping ahead to present day now that they're fused together, Emil is terrified of what he's become due to himself and Halua both being made into weapons. The incident at the Eyrie basically proves to him that they're monsters, who've now both ended countless lives. Between Halua's rampage in the research facility and Emil's explosion at the Eyrie, they have a massive body count. Emil lives fighting his instincts, afraid that he'll lose to them and hurt the people he loves. So, fourth fragment acquired. We head on back to Popola and she tells us about Red Bag Guy going missing and how we should check out Seafront to find him. This time around, we get to see the memories of the postman and the little girl Shade. The first scene is just the postman finding the shipwreck. A little bit later, we get to see him going in and finding the little girl. She's scared of him, but he shows her kindness. After more walking around, we get another scene where the postman goes to check on her. She had a cough that's gotten better by this point, and the postman gives her some food too. Since the little girl is a Gestalt and can't speak the Replicant tongue, she stays silent. Despite this, the postman grows attached to her and names her Louise. She likes the name, so she keeps it. After that scene, we do some more wandering and get another one soon after. The postman shows up and notices Louise rocking a cool red bag, and he asks where she got it. She gestures that she found it on the ship, and the postman reveals that he brought her a ribbon to put in her hair. He finds a mirror and tries to get her in the sunlight, which she promptly refuses. He chalks it up to Louise being stuck in the dark for so long, and then says that they should figure out how to get her comfortable with going outside to see the ocean together. The scene ends, we walk some more, and another begins. The color palette changes, so it's now in the present. The postman tries to bring her food, but she can't eat it. He thinks she's feeling down, so he hums her a song. He explains that music makes the tough times easier, and Louise hums him the song back. Apparently, the postman learned the song from the old lady in the lighthouse before she passed away. So, Louise hums it back to him to try and cheer him up. That cutscene ends, and then we get a party talk between Kaine, Tyrion, and Emil. Tyrion says he senses a magical presence, and Kaine asks if it's a shade. Emil asks what's wrong, and Kaine relays the info. We head on over to the shipwreck, where we meet up with Kaine and Emil, and we head in, where there is yet another cutscene. The postman asked about Louise writing a letter, and apparently he taught her how to write. She hasn't gotten it done yet, though. The postman asks if she wants to live with him as a daughter, but she declines. He then notices blood on the ground under her, and assumes it's her period. The scene then ends. This time around, after we crash through the floor and find the bodies, we get another scene with Louise. She laments the fact that she can't be with the postman because she isn't human, and then says that maybe if she eats enough people, she'll be able to become one. We head on into her boss fight, and this time when she hulks out, we get to see that her chasing the postman is because she doesn't want to hurt him. During the boss fight, we get some lovely interjections from Tyrion about her singing, and Louise explains that all she wants is to be a human to live with the postman. Of course, Tyrion thinks it's both really funny and really sad. During Phase 2, we find out that Kaine holding the postman hostage is Tyrion's plan. After Louise rocks our shit and we get knocked down, we see that her freezing as the postman attacks her is from having her heart broken by his hate. When we leave Seafront, we get a scene with Kaine. Apparently, she took one of the letters Louise tried to write for the postman, and Tyrion asks her what it says. Before we find out, Kaine rips it up and scatters it to the wind. We go back to Popola, tell her about the situation, and then get sent the wedding invite from the King of Facade. Along the way, we get scenes of the Wolf Shade and his pack. Basically, the wolf laments that the desert used to be a forest before humans came along. He then says that he's sure the wolves and the humans could live together. We find out that the king's guard went to the wolf den and slaughtered as many wolves as they could before the king's wedding. That even includes the pups. So, the wolves launch an assault on the king's wedding to get revenge. During the battle with the wolves, the pack leader screams about deforestation, pollution, and now the massacre of the pack. When we go to launch the raid on the wolf pack, we get another scene where the wolves discuss what to do. Instead of choosing to flee, they make a stand to die with honor. The boss fight is the same, just with remarks of hatred from the wolves, as well as the humans this time. When the king lands the finishing blow, we get a little scene that shows the wolf used to be the loyal pet of a human that he calls grandfather before passing away. As we head back to the village, there's another new scene between the party. NieR is worried about dragging Kaine and Emil into the battle with the Shadow Lord, where they promptly hear him talking and tell him to knock that shit off. Kaine and Emil both owe NieR, but they say that after the Shadow Lord business, they're gonna go on a quest to find a cure for the two of them. We head on up to the shrine and start the final gauntlet through Shadow Lord's castle, and things are identical until the dance hall after the Divala and Popola fight. Here we find out that the little shade orbs are actually baby shades. After they form the giant boar, the boar basically shit-talks us through the whole fight. Same as usual, NieR is a rampaging murderer who needs to be stopped. However, during the second armored boar fight before the king and his men appear, we get a little character moment between Kaine and Tyrion. She calls him out for using hate and violence as a crutch, and she admits it's also a crutch for her too. She thinks it's too late for the two of them to go back though. After the second Divala and Popola fight, we get a new scene with the king. His men are dead, and the showdown is just between him and the boar. He readies his spear as the boar charges, and manages to impale it, subsequently being crushed. We get his dying words about seeing Fira in the afterlife. During the Shadow Lord battle, we get a conversation between Kaine and Tyrion. Tyrion notices that her heart isn't full of hate and sadness anymore, and Kaine explains that she's content being with NieR. After Yona's gestalt burns herself out of Replicant Yona, we get to hear Shadow Lord freaking out and grieving. By the end of the battle, he accepts his death, and that he'll meet Yona in the afterlife. We strike the killing blow, and get a new scene of the Shadow Lord regretting everything he's done. We get to see the original Yona and NieR spending time together and eating the cookie from the beginning. Shadow Lord sees the other boss shades in the afterlife, and then meets up with Yona who thanks him for everything. And that's ending B. Except we've actually got a little after credits scene. Emil's head goes flying into the desert, where he rolls around and tries to find a body for himself before meeting back up with the party. Now that's actually all of ending B. So now we've got to go back in to get ending C. We've also got even more extra scenes this playthrough, involving Popola and Divala. They're basically the masterminds of this whole plan, sending NieR to stop the Shadow Lord from his rampage. Later on, we find out that they know about Louise, and plan to keep her as an ace in the hole if things go wrong with their plan. They also explain that she can't become human at all because she has no replicant. At least that's what I'm assuming, they just say she doesn't have a receptacle. We continue on to the Louise battle again, but here things actually change. When she goes to blast us at the end of the battle, we actually break her weak point. She falls over, and we climb onto the body of the Shade, fighting our way up to the little girl. There's a little bullet hell, but we take her down and she dies just the same as the previous endings. When we go to leave the town, the cutscene where Kaine reads the letter is different this time too. She doesn't rip it up, and instead meets up with a postman. Kaine gives him the letter, and all it says is thank you. He cries grieving over her. Even though she ate people, he still loved her to the end. Nothing is different until the second Divala and Popola fight at Shadow Lord's castle, where we get to see Emil's thoughts after the implosion. He sees his body crumbling to dust, and his life flashes before his eyes. We're brought into Emil's dream, Promise. Emil reminisces on a birthday that himself and Halua shared. Before they got all turned into magical nuclear devices, they still spent a ton of time at the research facility. Originally, they were told it was a regular orphanage, but we know how that turned out. Anyways, their teacher shows up and surprises the twins with cookies for their birthday, even though Emil totally forgot what day it was. Halua also gives him a drawing she made, where she clearly used every crayon in the box. We shoot back to present day, where Emil is happy that his last memory is of that birthday, and the picture Halua drew. As Emil accepts his fate, Halua's voice appears. Emil asks if he died, where his sister tells him he's still alive. She uses the last bit of her magic to keep Emil safe, before saying she needs him to keep on living for both of them. He appears somewhere with a beautiful blue sky, presumably the desert from the post-credits scene, and decides to keep on living. We head on into the Shadow Lord fight, and things are normal until the killing blow. This time, Kaine is covered in the black scroll after the fight ends, where she tries to leave before it completely takes her over. Tyrion says the two had a ton of fun, before breaking down and realizing he hated all of it. All the death and chaos was pointless. Kaine says he spent too much time hanging out with her, and he retorts by trying to take her body over. NieR notices, and Kaine asks him to kill her instead of letting her turn into a shade. Kaine begs Tyrion to stop, but he can't control it either because they're both going Gestalt. And here is our real final boss. The first phase of the battle is a bullet hell where you have no magic and just have to survive. After that, it turns into a 1v1 again. While fighting, Tyrion tells NieR that he can save Kaine. Tyrion will pin her down, and NieR has to stab her through the heart. After we knock her down, we're given a choice. We can either kill her and end her suffering, or we can sacrifice our very existence to turn her into a human. I knew I was going for all the endings, so I made the choice to put her down. NieR stabs her through the heart and gives her a kiss before she dies. Tyrion tells NieR that Kaine is really, truly free now, and that her final words for him were thank you. Kaine's lunar tear is on the ground, so NieR takes it. We get one last image of him looking out the window before ending C is over. I loaded my safe back up and knew it had to be done. After one final run through the Shadow Lord's castle, we reach the final room. Grimoire Noir is cut down, Vice sacrifices himself again, Shadow Lord is done for, and then we've just got Kaine. After taking her down, I choose to sacrifice NieR. Tyrion lays it out for us. If we go through with this, nobody will even remember NieR existed. Oh, and for gameplay ramifications, this decision deletes all of your save data. No, straight up, this is the ultimate sacrifice. The game asks you 4 times if you're sure, and then asks you to type your name in. The game then opens up the journal and shows it deleting everything out of your inventory. After this is done, Kaine wakes up and finds Yona, who thanks her for saving her life and killing the Shadow Lord. Kaine gets flashes of the memory of NieR though, and she starts crying. The two look out the window, and the credits roll. So, this is where the original version of NieR ends. If you did this ending, it was over. All your save data was permanently deleted, and there was no way to get it back unless you backed it up somewhere. And for that, I applaud the team at Caveat. What a powerful move, just handing this big decision to the player and letting them actually face the consequences. Of course, there are several warnings beforehand, so you can't just accidentally do this. It's a deliberate choice to delete your experience with the game to save Kaine. I know people shit on Yoko Taro for putting this in the game, but I think it's a fantastic decision. What puts more weight on the player's decisions than making them have real consequences? This isn't just killing an NPC and continuing on. Hours of your life are gone for the sake of fulfilling this game's story. I think it's beautiful. However, this isn't the original version of NieR. I've said that several times at this point, goofball. This is the remake, NieR Replicant version 1.22 string of numbers. So, we aren't done here. This game has one final ending to get, ending E. How do we get it if all of our save data is gone? Well, we've got to start a new game. That's right, we have to play the prologue, meet our protagonist again, find Vice, save Yona, the whole ordeal all over again. That is all the way until the second fight against Hook. We kick the beast's ass alongside Kaine, where she gets knocked out just like our first playthrough. NieR and Vice call out to her, asking her not to give up. When she reaches for NieR's hand, however, it fades, leaving her to sink into the abyss. She wakes up and realizes it was a dream. She clutches the hilt of her sword, crying as she opens her eyes. We are playing as Kaine now. She's only got one sword because her other one broke, but her gameplay is pretty different from NieR's. She's extremely fast, hits super hard, and has a ton of new attacks and animations. Personally, I think she's honestly way more fun to play as than NieR. So we head out to the plains and find a guard being attacked by shades. We clear them up and tell him to go home, but apparently he has to go to the Forest of Myth because nobody from the village there will respond to them. Kaine takes up the job so this poor guy doesn't get mauled, and we head on over. We're greeted by the sight of all the villagers dead on the ground. As we head up to the Divine Tree, it has a seal on it. Tons of machines pour out and attack us. Of course, they're no match for Kaine. We head into the tree, which has a long tunnel into the earth. While running down, we're greeted by strange voices. They know Kaine's name and that she's a replicant. We're told we'll meet with them soon. We continue on, and the voices basically tell us that the tree is a giant information database designed to look like a tree. They also explain the ending of the game a bit more. Basically, the Shadow Lord is the original Gestalt from the Gestalt Project. By killing him, the Gestalts that are still alive have gone into a frenzy, which has led to the deaths of countless replicants. We get down to the heart of the tree, which is a giant mess of pipes and wires. We see where the voices are coming from, and they're machines that look like children. They call themselves the Administrators, and send a giant robot to fight us. We take it down and head further in, where they summon a bunch of machine Kaines. Even more lore, they explain that these are plant-based propulsion units bound together with Mosso particles. Mosso particles are the particles that came from the bodies of Angelus and the Queen Beast. The Mosso particles from the Queen Beast cause white chlorination syndrome, and the particles from Angelus allowed for the Gestalt project to function. Back to the situation at hand, Kaine is doing her best, but as soon as she destroys one of the clones of her, they just spring back up. Soon enough, Kaine is overwhelmed, but just as things start to get bad, a friendly face saves us. Emil is back, with 4 arms this time instead of 2. He goes to destroy the magic circle that's giving the clones life, so Kaine just fights them back while we defend Emil. We break on through, and end up in an endless white space. This will look familiar to anyone who has played through NieR Automata. Kaine and Emil try to catch up, but Emil tells Kaine that too much has happened in the last 3 years. They both also try to remember NieR, but to no avail. We head on through this area, which resembles the Shadow Lord's castle. In a copy of the bedroom we fought Shadow Lord in, we find a big floating cube. The administrators tell us that this cube is the core of the tree, which stores all known information in the world. So, naturally, we try to destroy it. As we do more damage, we hear NieR's voice ringing through the room. They're Kaine and Emil's memories of NieR. After beating it up some more, we seemingly get absorbed into it. There's more lore explanation, that replicants are artificial and the Gestalts are the real humans, and we've basically ended countless human lives. We fight through our memories, even refighting Gretel. We kill him, and are forced to fight Hook again. We get a bullet hell section, but after we finish it, Hook gets out of our range and we can't hit him. He charges up some magic and hits us with it, knocking us to the ground. We get back up, but it's another bullet hell, and we get shot down by the villagers that used to harass Kaine as a child. She gets taken down, and we're shot into another memory section. She wakes up and is surrounded by villagers staring at her. She's confused because she is in an entirely different place than before. It's the Aerie, and she sees her grandmother behind her. Kaine thinks it's either a dream or she's died, but Kali assures her it's neither of those things. As happy as Kaine is to see her grandma, she can't really shake the feeling. Despite that, as soon as Kali mentions forgetting to buy her medicine, Kaine takes charge and goes to the apothecary for her. The apothecary happily greets her and makes mention of the portrait she drew of Kali. Kaine cringes at the thought that other people have seen the portrait because she's sure that it's awful. The apothecary compliments the portrait heavily, and Kaine is uncomfortable about the whole thing. He gives Kaine the medicine, and as she's leaving, she hears a thud. She sees the apothecary on the ground, who is unresponsive. He then starts screaming for help as his limbs begin to fade away, eventually leaving nothing of the man behind. Outside, madness unfolds. The area is falling apart, and everyone is vanishing. Kaine freaks out and runs home to find her grandma. The place is burnt down, but her grandma is still alive. Kaine digs through the ashes of her home to find Kali. Kaine picks her up and starts running, but her leg vanishes and they fall to the ground. She grabs Grandma again, but as she crawls away, Kali vanishes completely. Kaine beats herself up for being pulled into the safety and security of the dream. Before she can get too caught up in that, though, she hears a voice calling out to her. The charming British accent and verbose method of speaking seems a little familiar. The voice explains that Kaine is looking for NieR, and she needs to come back. Kaine wakes up as Hook is about to crush her, but a magic lance hits him on the shoulder and he falls down. Hey, Weiss is back! And now, the two of them have got to kick some ass. Weiss has all of the sealed verses, so we're expected to just go hog wild here. After beating the shit out of Hook, we blast him away with magic. As it turns out, the administrators get destroyed too. They also say the phrase, "I hear a song," as they fade away, which is a very important phrase in this series. Anyways, Kaine cusses NieR out after killing Hook and tells him that he better come back. We see him in the distance and walk over, where the game asks us if we want to save him. It deletes our save data as Kaine, but recovers the data lost in Ending D. We confirm it and see all of the stuff in our journal come back. We then get to choose a save location. After doing that, we get our last cutscene. An enormous flower rises out of the ground and blooms, with Kaine and young NieR on the stigma of the flower. Kaine gives a final monologue about facing the future together as the flower blooms, and the game ends. So, that is every single ending in NieR Replicant version 1.22. But we're not quite done here. There's one final secret. It's called a parting greeting. I'm gonna play it, but be warned it's a clip from stream, so past me is talking over it.
Alright, is everybody here?
Present and accounted for.
What the fuck is this?
Sure. Alright then. Dear players, the game is over, and we have a special message for you. Thank you for playing.
Yona, why aren't you in bed?
Oh, hey! It's my big brother.
It's fucking...
I just didn't want to miss this. Try and take it easy on her, okay? Yeah, you wouldn't turn down a request from your adorable little sister, would ya?
Popola, Devila, you're here too?
Looks like you're having yourself a grand old time, sunshine.
Okay, who was that?
Shut up, Tyrion. You'll just make things complicated.
Why'd she pronounce it differently?
The world, Let us finish what we came here to do.
So, it's really gonna be over, huh? Does that make anyone else feel sad?
Yes,
We'll
immensely.
have to say goodbye eventually. But hey, I'm sure we'll meet again.
In NieR Reincarnation, releasing 2021.
Hungry over here. Want to hurry this up?
Alright, once again, from the top.
Dear players, the game is over, and we have a special message for you. Ready? 1, 2, thank you for playing.
And that is really it. That's everything. Oh, except for the Mom's Diary and the 70 side quests and fishing and farming and grinding for materials for 20 hours to upgrade every weapon to max and...
Oh, hey.
Okay, got a little distracted there. Where were we? Oh, right, the conclusion. This game is fantastic. I love NieR Replicant. I streamed the entire thing and had such a good time experiencing the story, the characters, the gameplay, the world. Everything about it is great. I can't really fault the game for much, especially the remake. The original is a bit rough technically, with boring gameplay and frequent frame drops, but the remake patched those up and is a genuine masterpiece now. There's something to be said about how obnoxious running back and forth across the world is, and how there's a lot of fetch quests and boring monotony throughout the game. NieR was made with a sort of hatred for open world games and how boring and repetitive they can be. There's a masterful exploration of that concept in the first half though. You're jaded by picking flowers and fishing and getting medicine, so all you want to do is go back to the plot and kill shades. In doing so, you get into NieR's headspace. That hatred fuels you, and the joy of killing shades parallels NieR's own anger and violence. I think the end of the first half is perfectly timed for when you get completely burnt out on it, so when the second half starts, it's a breath of fresh air. There's a noticeable difference in the quality of the main plot too. The first half is very meandering, and it's about surviving with Yona. The second half kicks in, and it's a focused, violent story about revenge and saving your sister. Yoko Taro and his team are excellent at this. I guess you'd call it ludonarrative harmony? The plot matches the gameplay perfectly. You are playing the villain in this game, and you don't even realize it until it's far too late to turn back. Just like in Drakengard 1, where you're incentivized to slaughter as many enemies as possible for experience and weapon levels. Here, it's for levels, upgrade materials, magic words, healing items, everything revolves around violence. So, for anyone who's seen my Drakengard video and has been waiting for the other shoe to drop here, it's time to get into it. During the creation of NieR, Yoko Taro was heavily influenced by the events of September 11th, 2001. The core story of NieR is of a conflict between two sides who can't understand each other, waging meaningless, violent war. Through the events we see leading up to ending B, the Shades are mostly peaceful creatures who have to fight for survival. Replicants are the ones perpetuating violence that the Shades try to save themselves from. I don't know that I'm the best person to talk about this topic, because, to be perfectly honest, I was not a conscious being during the post-9/11 era. I definitely remember hearing about it, especially on the radio. But I was really young, and that felt like a world away from me. Looking at it retrospectively, I can see a lot of elements surrounding that time and apply them to NieR's plot. Like when people talk about the states being united during that time, but plenty of darker-skinned people were violently harassed if they so much as looked the wrong way. I've experienced some of the aftermath firsthand, though. Gotta love being a feminine-presenting person and getting your dick grabbed by TSA to make sure it isn't a bomb. Or my friends and their family getting stopped by the TSA because their skin is a bit too dark and their beard is a bit too big for their standards. I know this is a very big topic to cover in a YouTube video about a video game, but I think it's important to talk about, especially because of the outcome of NieR's plot. I'll give another spoiler warning here because it does spoil story elements of NieR Automata, but I have to talk about the ramifications of the ending and what happens afterward. So, I'll give you a moment to click off of the video. So, now that all those people have left, let's finish up here. Due to the replicants being artificial bodies, they are infertile and can't reproduce. The Gestalts are required to fuse back with their replicants to become full humans, which would allow them to reproduce and continue the existence of the human race. Due to NieR killing the Shadow Lord, he ensures that replicants and Gestalts will never be able to come together. The Shadow Lord is the only thing prolonging the Shades from going Gestalt, which is when they become violent and destructive. No Shadow Lord means that every single Shade is guaranteed to go Gestalt eventually. Whether it takes a week or a millennia, humanity is completely doomed to extinction. I feel strongly that this is a commentary on the futility of war and mutually assured destruction causing the end of all life. Humanity has created enough weapons of war that, if things go south, we could wipe each other out in a matter of hours. It doesn't happen that quickly in NieR, but over the course of about 1,000 years, humanity slowly but surely guarantees their destruction. From fighter jets shooting down Caim and Angelus after the death of the Queen Beast, to NieR executing the Shadow Lord, humanity's end is almost entirely brought on by their own hands, by pointless violence, by revenge and hatred. It's also no surprise that a major theme in this game is discrimination. Kaine is discriminated against for being intersex as a kid, and then for having a shade in her after she gets possessed by Tyrion. Emil hates himself for being who he is, even though that's out of his control. He hates his eyes when we meet him, then after he fuses with Holua, he still despises his body, despite it saving Kaine and his sister. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I believe he's implied to be gay. Emil and Kaine are fantastic characters for queer people like myself, because of their explorations of self-loathing and discrimination for things out of our control. I never chose to be transgender, nobody does. I just got a funny hand of cards dealt to me, and I'm making the best of my experience on this earth. Sure, I've been discriminated against, but it makes the love I feel for my friends and family that much stronger. I understand why Kaine and Emil are who they are, and why they do what they do. They're hellbent on protecting and saving NieR, even when he seems irredeemable to us. It's a beautiful dynamic, and the writing is again top-notch here. The animations, the music, the voice acting, this game is a work of art. I truly can't recommend NieR Replicant enough. It's a fantastic game. The symbolism of humanity being directly split in two and doomed to destruction if they're unable to come together is a very clear representation of hate and bigotry. This game is basically the song Right in 2 by Tool, except it's a few dozen hours long instead of 9 minutes. There's also a correlation to be made here with Spec Ops: The Line, another game I love very, very much. And I know, Spec Ops is basically made for video essayists and losers like myself, but that game genuinely clicked with me. Oftentimes, we see the glorification of war in games. Call of Duty, the biggest game franchise, at least in the West, is literally a government psyop to recruit soldiers into the war machine. I mean, come on, you get to play as these guns-blazing badasses like Ghost or Woods, often against Middle Eastern or Russian soldiers. American propaganda around the Cold War was all about dehumanizing and building hate for Russia, and post 9/11, America justified that tragedy to justify hatred against people in the Middle East. Games like Spec Ops and NieR flip the propaganda on its head, reminding us that these are living human beings. Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, they're all countries filled with living, breathing people. By dehumanizing them and ignoring their voices, we perpetuate violence and death. NieR himself is the catalyst for a lot of the slaughter, and he commits unspeakable violence against hundreds of people. His companions are all complacent and complicit in following his lead. They're not necessarily evil, though. Kaine and Emil have a conscience, but they're heavily indebted to NieR and owe him their lives. But there's another layer here, as NieR himself is a puppet dancing on strings held by Divala and Popola. We can absolutely relate this to our protagonist being your average boots-on-the-ground soldier. Often, soldiers enlist to make a living, to get out of poverty, or to provide for their families. Emil is like this, owing NieR a great debt and being forced to pay it in blood. Kaine starts off fighting for revenge, like plenty of troops who enlisted after 9/11. After she gets her revenge, she tries to get out and leave the violence behind, but NieR pulls her back in. He's still gotta fight, and Kaine has to help him. We could absolutely say, well, the Shadow Lord kidnapped Yona and NieR is justified in his actions. But the Gestalts didn't make the first move, and the Gestalts that attacked Replicants aren't in control of themselves. The Shadow Lord launches a counterattack against NieR and his village, because NieR has already killed so many Gestalts. From the Shadow Lord's perspective, he's likely a hero, saving Yona from Replicant NieR. He also knows what's going on, and that Gestalts and Replicants have to fuse together to make humanity whole again. It's just tragic that NieR is filled with so much hate, he can't listen to Popola and Divala's warnings to back off and not kill the Shadow Lord. Even after they hand him the project research papers, NieR ignores all that, and his ultimate decision is violence. The Shadow Lord doesn't get a good ending in any route of the game. They all result in his death, and him and Yona end up in the afterlife together. Our protagonists canonically get their happy ending with ending E. They're all together and alive, even if their species is doomed. They also don't get to bring back Vice, or the King of Facade, or Divola, or Popola. Even the technical best ending is still full of bloodshed and loss. Now, this is an extremely late addition to the script, and one that I deem necessary to add. As of the time of editing and re-recording some lines for the script of this video, Gaza is under siege by the Israeli military. Myself, along with many others, are calling for a ceasefire. Men, women, and children are being bombed and slaughtered as I type and read these words out. The original thesis of this video was that we cannot be silent about violence, and must fight for those under attack. The genocide happening in Palestine is a completely avoidable evil that cannot be allowed to continue. I find it extremely unfortunate that over a decade later, the themes of NieR are still completely relevant to our lives. War is an unjustifiable evil that cannot continue to exist. Our governments have the tools at hand to stop this conflict entirely, but complacency leads to death, and the war machine is churning out so much profit that the humans being bombed out of existence are too profitable to let survive. I'll leave donation links in the description to help survivors and refugees from Gaza and Palestine for those who are able to donate. I want to do my part to ease suffering and help the survivors keep living.